All right,
Woohoo!
we are live. Hello, welcome everybody to Sweetcast. We have a special guest today. I've got to tell you though, first off, I've taken several days off because I we've been planning this big kitchen renovation. We bought a fixer upper, and so all weekend, well, really since the 4th of July, I've been fixing up my living room and the kitchen, and it's been a nightmare. And it always takes longer than you think.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I can
getting
imagine.
back into it. So really happy to be talking to Jason Brubaker. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. And it's cool too because usually I'm talking to people on in different time zones, and you're a fellow mountain timer.
Yeah,
So
it's so unusual. It's very strange. I
yeah,
It makes it so easy because I mess up the time zones no matter what. Almost, it's just bound to be messed up whenever I schedule it. So this is perfect. That's why I'm here on time.
yeah, works out really good. Yeah. So but I know you did not always live in uh,
Idaho.
Idaho, right? You live
Yeah,
in Pocatello, I think, somewhere around there.
yeah.
Um,
Hotel's right.
yeah, so that's new for you. Was comics part of the reason for the move?
No, Pocatello. I lived here for a couple of years with my parents when I was in high school, and I graduated high school here and was here for about a year after. And so a lot of like there's some good memories with and times of just really trying to get into comics while I was living here. And went to Denny's every night and would draw with my friends. That was our studio. And then when I was 20 years old, I moved to LA and got represented by an agency for doing storyboards and got into the movie industry, and everything took off from there. And so moving back to Pocatello is kind of like I never thought I would do it, but after 20 years of being in LA and getting married and having kids, it just seemed like the right place to go now. And so my parents are here and they're retired, and it's just a small town. It's really mellow. I can just really focus, and the cost of living's super cheap. So everything just kind of made sense at that time and made the transition back out of LA. So,
Nice. Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting, and I get it a lot. I'm in Utah, and people are like, "Do they even do comics in Utah, or is that And it does feel like I'm a little secluded when it comes to comics.
yeah,
But I still have a local comic shop and everything. But the internet has really been amazing for
yeah,
comics and just
yeah,
networking with people and everything.
yeah,
It would you can live anywhere. You don't need to live in a certain place to be able to make comics.
yeah, yeah. It's true. And I mean, I was told like when I first moved to LA, like if you put in 20 years there, and it's weird that it happened with me, but if you put in 20 years there, you'll be able to live anywhere. And as if you've built your clientele and your career. But then my thing is, well, and that was before the internet was really the factor in it. So it seems like that was the common idea. But I moved away from LA, and I just kind of like not severed ties, but I stopped doing all the Hollywood stuff, and I just went a completely different career. So it's bizarre,
Yeah.
and the internet really allowed me to do that for sure. Like just switch careers and start a web comic and put it online and grow an audience, and then Kickstarter came out and Patreon later, and it's just like this is a whole new world now.
Nice. Well, I want to get into all of that stuff, and I actually
Yeah.
have a lot of questions for you. I've been following your comics career for quite a while. I think it was your Remind blog that I first. Well, let's see. I think
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out how to color comic pages. That's
Oh
how it
yeah.
started out,
Yeah.
and you had some tutorials, and so that's how I got introduced to you. And yeah, lots of useful stuff, and it was inspiring that you were just doing it your own way, and that was
Yeah.
you were, I think, the first person, at least for me, that I've ever seen that found a way to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so
It really seems like there was like web comics, like the gag a day type comics at that time, but it was really hard to find people who were doing long form comics at that time online. And in fact, it seemed like it was the place where people go when they can't find a house for it, like it through a publisher. And so I was working on this thing for a long time. It was first in animation, and then I was like, I pitched it in Hollywood, and some producers were like, "Why don't you do this as a comic?" And I was like, "Well, I don't do that anymore. You know, I've grown up." And so I didn't like the idea at first, but then I finally thought about it, and I was like, "This is a good idea to try to create the thing as a comic, so it could just live and breathe and be its own finished entity, you know, and then maybe I could pitch it to Hollywood later." So I switched from doing the animated version to the graphic novel version of Remind, which is what you're talking about. And I just dove online after about 3 years of working on it in seclusion. I finally got I got a job at DreamWorks. So that's a whole another story. And when I was there, I was like, should I even keep working on this? Like, I've gotten the dream job, so to speak. And so I was like, you know, I'll just put it online and see if anyone cares. And I don't care if I get an agent or a publisher anymore, because I have the dream job, you know, like it's full time. And so I just started putting it out as a web comic. I started scouring blogs just to figure out how people got exposure at that time, and if there's other comic artists doing it. It was just really like only a couple that I could really find that were really doing it beautifully. But it was really rare, and nobody had really, it seemed like, cracked the code yet. They were more like doing it out of a passion project. And that's where I was at too, you know, it was a passion project, and my job was paying the bills. So I figured I'll just put it online, see if people care more than my family. And sure enough, you know, people cared. And then it really started this fire for me to just keep posting and start blogging, and, you know, all the things I'm learning, I'm putting online. And that was an exciting time, because it was just like my eyes were just opening every week with new possibilities, you know. And then Kickstarter came out, and my commenters told me, "Hey, go join put this on Kickstarter." And I was like, why would that work? You know, 2010, I think, is when it launched. So yeah, I've been doing Kickstarter and Indiegogo stuff for about almost 10 years now, which is weird to think about it.
Yeah, and it's really such a new route for comics.
Yeah.
And it feels like more so lately there have been a lot more. I mean, there have been comics creators doing crowdfunding, but lately it really feels like there are just more people becoming accustomed to backing projects.
Yeah.
And so it becomes, I don't know, it seems like a really viable route to get your stuff out there for independent comics. So, and, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if some other like bigger publishers are going to start doing some kinds of things like that. I don't know. I've heard rumors. Let me check in with the chat real quick.
All right.
Everybody, Jason Brubaker is here live. If you're here and you know somebody, I'm sure you do, please share this out so we can get as many eyeballs here as possible. That really, really helps. I've got a question in the chat from Albino Thunderbuns. It says, "Where's your co-host? Please tell me he's at the barbershop getting cornrows." Well, it is his anniversary, so that's why he's not here. He actually said, "I think I could make it for the show," and I'm like, I don't know about that. And then 5 minutes later, he said, "Nope, I can't." I was like, "Yeah, that's what I thought." So yeah, he's got something more important to do. One of the few things more important to do. We'll say that, his anniversary. Cal Jameson, I think this is a nice thing. He said, "I love that Brubaker guy. He was a huge reason I decided to open up about my faith as a comics creator."
Cool, man.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's another good thing about, I guess, about being independent is you can just be who you are, you know. Whether there's, you know, it feels like there can be pressure for sure to make it in mainstream comics. I don't know, that way, at least it feels that way. Now I saw, I think, recent videos of yours where you showed some portfolio pieces. Maybe they were older videos, I'm not sure. From when you were trying to get into comics, sort of the traditional route. What was your first like desires with comics? What was your goal career-wise?
Well, you know, I was a teenager, and even in like junior high, even I started digging into comics, and my dad gave me some and Spider-Man comics, and I just fell in love with the medium, and fell in love with Todd McFarlane's stuff, and, you know, Eric Larson and Sam Keith, all these Image comic guys that started Image. When that started, I was right there when that was happening. It was just like, yeah, it was like this huge like artist uprising. which it kind of feels like it's the same thing now, but with indie comics, everyone's starting their own studios instead of all the artists turning, joining forces and making one new studio like Image. Anyway, so I was just like obsessed with it. I started like drawing Spider-Man. That was kind of my dream when I was a teenager. It was like, someday I'll draw Spider-Man. So I started building my portfolio, not building a portfolio, but just submitting stuff to comic publishers as much as I could and learning that whole process, and started getting better at penciling and realized my inks aren't very good. So I'll just focus on penciling and submitting it to all these different publishers and doing a new submission for this person, new submission for that person. And eventually it got to the point to where like probably the one you're referring to is probably the Wildcat submission that I sent to Jim Lee, which I just showed that one off a couple days ago on my YouTube channel. And it's by far some of the best, most detailed comic work I've done. I have quite a few submissions that are about that detailed. And, my goal was just, I want to just get hired by these guys, by one of these studios. And I was actually at San Diego Comic-Con and showing my portfolio around. It was like 94, I think. And that last year that I went, I remember I got 8 job offers from different companies, all from small publishers all the way up to I got a job with White Wolf, which I did illustrations for White Wolf, like Vampire the Masquerade books. So that was my first paid gig. I did about 5 books for them. And then I also got approached by an agent in Hollywood to do storyboards. And I kind of barely understood what storyboards were at the time, but he showed me all the artists that he represented and told me about the pay, which was a ridiculous amount of good money. And he's like, if you can move to LA, I can represent you. And I was like, done, I'll figure it out. And so 2 months later, I had my car packed and I moved to LA and slept on someone's couch. And, they represented me. And I put together samples and specifically for them and to kind of prove that I could do it. And, but then that just changed my career direction completely. I just, like overnight, I just abandoned comics almost. I still loved comics, but it just never felt like it was a real career for some reason, because I was always a teenager when I was trying to get into comics. And then suddenly I was in LA working in movies with directors and producers and big budgets. And I was like, okay, well, why would I go back to comics, But then later on in life, I realized I really love comics because it's like a movie, but one person can do it. And so I just, eventually I found my way all the way back to doing comics, and that's what I'm doing now. It's really strange. The career was really helpful,
Yeah.
Very helpful.
So that's a something that comes up a lot. Like I get this question, and I know I've felt this way, but it feels like to grow your own sort of online presence and get a following, it helps if you have some street cred, so to speak. And so, and I've published a couple novels, never in comics though. I've always written scripts for comics and sent in submissions to Image Comics, and just done all these little things, but hadn't gotten published. And so it was like, how do I do this? And so finding kind of what works for you. In my case, it was like, I'm breaking into comics, help me break into comics, and that seemed to work. And then for you, I know like a big thing was, and this was almost discouraging a little bit to me when I first started following you, is that I looked at what you were doing and I saw that you had worked at DreamWorks. I thought, oh, I could do that if I had that background of working at DreamWorks. And so no doubt it helped. No doubt.
Well, what's interesting is when I was putting Remind out online, I didn't want anyone to know I worked at DreamWorks, because I wanted the comic and my art to speak for itself and to grow a following on its own. I didn't want to be one of these like Disney artists who happened to have a side project that no one cared about. I wanted to be the guy who made this comic. And oh yeah, maybe later on you can find out I worked at this place, but I don't want that place to be who I am. And so I was really, really, careful not to ever mention it. It wasn't until it started getting really successful that I said, oh yeah, by the way, I work here too.
Right.
you know, so, and it's
Well,
definitely not the thing that it didn't train me to do comics. I like the storyboarding career, I think, was one of the better careers for training me to tell stories and doing comics, more than even DreamWorks. DreamWorks was great for my color theory understanding. I really dove into color theory at DreamWorks, and that was great.
yeah. Well, that's good because I think that you've achieved it. To me, the DreamWorks thing, I kind of forget, like, oh yeah, that is part of your history. It does feel,
Yeah,
I mean this is a compliment, but it feels more like a footnote
yeah,
to
yeah.
your success in comics. Now we've got, let's see, we've got 35 people and counting right now, 36. I just want to real quickly before we get into some more stuff is show off your campaign that
Okay.
you've got going on right now, and this is a big deal. Citera
Yeah,
5 and 6. And I've got to say, so I saw this. I'd been meaning to back Citera, and it just seemed like, I don't know, I just never did. I read Remind, and I never got around to it. But you had this tier. I don't know if you still got it. Yes. The complete set. I backed this the first day that you launched it because I'm like, I'm going to get it, the whole set. And that is a good deal.
yeah.
So you're
It's a really good deal. And the only reason I can
6 months.
afford it is because I've printed already the first 4 books. So I have a bunch of them in my, in my garage or storage room. And so they don't cost me anything to print the first 4. So I'm selling those at 50% of the cover price. It's just the 2 new ones that are full price. So that's why I get it for $99, which is a steal. And it's about 1,000 pages total for the story.
Yeah.
Took me about 5 years.
No joke. And this will keep you busy for a while with
Yeah.
comics, which I'm really, to me, I like to just binge on comics. I'll
Yeah.
usually wait till I can buy like a few trade paperbacks rather than singles. Sometimes I collect singles. But yeah, this is perfect for me because I just want to binge it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you mind giving us a little pitch while I'll scroll through some of the art here? What
Oh,
is
sure.
Cithra
Yeah.
about? Yeah.
Yeah. So Citra is kind of inspired a lot by Miyazaki stuff. When I first moved to LA, I fell in love with Miyazaki's movies. And so it's kind of in that vein. It's about this little girl who her and her father, their plane crash and she can't find him, and she's stranded and alone in this foreign land. She doesn't know anything about it, doesn't know where her dad is. She starts seeing this invisible creature that's following her around named Cithra, and isn't quite sure if it's good or bad at first. And then she ends up learning about this kid named Dino, which you see right there, who's a kind of a troubled teenager who has a dark past. He's dealing with his own demons, and they kind of join forces to try to find her father. And Dino knows a lot more than he leads on to knowing, and it kind of takes him. The journey ends up taking him in and out of the spirit world, and it gets pretty dark at the end. It started out kind of like a all ages appropriate, and by the end, it's just like, whoa, this is like some dark stuff.
Yeah.
But
Nice.
it's really close to home for me. It's like really close to my heart, and it's really an emotional story for me as I read it now, and I'm really proud of it. And it's like, I mean, like I say, 1,000 pages. It's not a small feat, and I don't know quite how I did it in 5 years, but yeah, it's done now, and it's ready
Yeah.
for people to digest it.
This is no joke. And you're definitely one of the comics creators that's a very good, like you're a workhorse. You get a lot of story told. And so that's always been really inspiring to me as well. So yeah, everybody, the link to Cithra to back it to this Indiegogo campaign is in the description. Moderators, I hope you're on that too. Be posting the link. Right now, this is super impressive as always. Every time you launch a crowdfunding campaign, it's impressive. You got 61,828. Wouldn't surprise me if by the end of the night you're at 62,000. It would, a couple people get
Yeah.
the full book, the full 6 books, you're
Yeah.
over 62. That'd be great.
I just so people know too, it's I launched a week-long Kickstarter as well that just ended today because I was on Kickstarter for years, and a lot of my backers were like, "Why aren't you doing it on Kickstarter?" So I did a mini Kickstarter for them, and I had about another 145 people that backed it. So there's another $10,000 from that. So we're over 72,000 now, and so that means even more stretch goals have been reached. And yeah, it's just been going incredibly well.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So I kind of wanted to get through, and like I said earlier off the air, is dissect a little bit of what your success is and kind of how you built this thing. I know I have a lot of viewers here that are making their own comics, or they're just interested in how it's done. And so you're for sure a wealth of information. I'm going to start at the Remind blog because that's where I started,
Yeah.
where my introduction to you was. I don't know. I don't know. Let me know if you started before that, I guess.
No, that was my kind of my first appearance really online in more of a public way. Like I had like personal portfolio sites that I would give to potential clients, but it was never something that was meant to be found by people.
Mm.
And this was the first thing I ever did that was like, okay, let me put my opinion out there. And it'd make you nervous every time you would write a new blog post, like, people are gonna not agree with me on how to make comics. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
But yeah, Remind blog was the beginning. It was 2009 is when I started it, and every Tuesday, I believe, no, every Thursday I would post a new article, usually about making comics, and then every Monday I'd post a new double-page spread of the comic, and that was
Nice.
what I did. And then the articles started getting really popular amongst comic creators, and then it eventually turned into a book called Unnatural Talent, which you can get on Amazon or on Audible. It's kind of like a collection of all the articles. I've reformatted it and packaged it into a book form, and that came out in 2013. So it's a little dated. There's nothing about Patreon or YouTube in there because it was really before Patreon even started.
Yeah.
So
Well, so with this, I think during the time period, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the internet it for sure is evolving. But when it comes to comics or just online promotion or getting out there, there are different shifts and evolutions that happen. And so during this time period, it seemed like blogging was the way to go. Like you could get
yeah,
your information out to people and give people daily content. And I might be mixing a couple of my sources, but I think that I heard you refer to this as the strategy. Does that sound familiar at all?
yeah. I wrote about that in Unnatural Talent, and I had a whole game plan for people to follow that worked really well up until probably 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right when that book came out is when things started shifting and away from blogging. And but yeah, blogging was the key. It was such a big part of it, and just sharing information through blogs was huge. Like people would, because it was about organically people finding you organically through all the stuff you're writing about. And the only way to get those organic searches is by actually writing keywords and writing articles. Now with YouTube, goes through your videos and writes out all the words for you, and it's kind of attached to your videos, and so that's suddenly a part of the organic search now. So it's almost it's smarter now and easier to just make YouTube videos because
Yeah.
it's all being transcribed for you, and then it just feeds straight into that search engine.
Yeah.
Not to mention YouTube's the second biggest search engine in the world, or in America at least. So yeah, exactly. That was the strategy though.
Yeah, well, and the same principles I think apply to YouTube, maybe with a few differences. I mean,
Yeah.
more of like using how you use the tool. But it seems like something that worked for you is you're giving people content. Like you're on the Remind blog, you're giving people just free content.
Yep.
And that's what I know that drew me in, and tons of other people. And comics are interesting because people that love to read comics, or not always, but many of them want to make comics.
Yeah.
And surely anybody that likes to make comics also likes to read them. And so it's kind of natural. You can just talk about comics related stuff, making comics, doing your own thing. And in turn, people are hearing about the project you're working on, and it sort of grows from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to apply that too as well. Just like, you want to give entertaining content and try to give it to people frequently and be consistent. And then when it comes time for that ask of, hey, I've got this crowdfunding project,
Yeah.
people are more likely to back it because you've been
Yeah.
giving so much.
And I think it still applies now. Like, my mailing
Mhm.
lists are hands down the best and most responsive way to launch anything. You know,
Yeah.
I do YouTube a lot regularly, but even so, it's like, it's the videos that come out on my YouTube channel. They're still like acquiring those new people, and they're finding new people all the time, or people are stumbling into it, obviously, but it's building that trust over time. And
Mhm.
eventually people, filter into mailing lists, or hear me talk about something enough on my channel that they're like, you know what, when this is ready to go, I'll pull the trigger on it. I'll jump on his mailing list. And because really all the success I've had with all my campaigns has been because people have jumped onto some sort of mailing list saying, and I've sold the mailing list as like, this is a list that I won't spam you with. The only time I'll email you is when I have a new product for you, and people are
Mhm.
waiting for that product, you know? And
Yeah.
so when I say, here's the product, it's like a day and the campaign's funded.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the campaign is like really slow because everyone jumped on it the first second.
Right. No, and that is the best advice. If you don't mind, I'm going to show you my campaign.
Yeah.
It's in demand right now, and this is my first comic. I did a Kickstarter once for a card game, and it was a miserable failure. But like, so I did this comic, and I was really excited about it. I wrote it several years ago, and rewrote it, and launching it. I took the idea of a mailing list to heart. And I really think my YouTube channel is not huge, but that has been the engine for getting people to just be introduced to me. And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just promoting that mailing list, tried to be it short, brief every single video just so people knew about it. My mailing list wasn't huge, but it was such a targeted group of people that
Yeah.
the conversion rate was like far surpassed my expectations.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
And you
yeah,
don't
like I,
really
I
need
have
that
to,
big
I
of
have
a
to
group.
credit you
Oh,
for a lot of this. So
good, good. And what was surprising to me is, I if you do your mailing list right, not like try to like trick people to come onto it, but just do it
yeah,
right and like give people stuff for free, and then tell them like, join this list and I'll let you know when it's ready to buy. If you do it that way,
mm,
the conversion rate is really high when you're ready to sell something, and you'll be surprised at how few people you actually need. You don't need like 100,000 people on a mailing list to make a product work. Like, I think um, my mailing list was like, it was like 800 people or something when I was like, when I did I don't remember if it was the first campaign, but it was like so surprisingly uh, big numbers compared to what other people say mailing list conversion rates should be. It was something like 6 to 10% of my mailing list actually followed through and bought something, which was unheard of. You know, um,
yeah,
so it's like, if you just build that trust with that audience, um, just keep giving them that stuff and loving up on them, giving them stuff, building that trust. When you're ready to launch something, it's like people love it. And
yeah,
so, yeah, it's such a good strategy. And yeah, YouTube is seriously like the lead generator, but then you want to get them to like find
mm,
your mailing list eventually, I think, at
yeah.
least in some
What
way.
Yeah, YouTube, and I wonder, just like as you know, we went through that, blogging has shifted. It's no
Mhm.
longer. I'm sure there are successful blogs out there. I don't know,
Yeah, I don't know
but
either. I don't look at them anymore.
yeah, yeah. But YouTube videos are so successful
Yeah,
when it comes to just getting out to new people, and you also get feedback just with the analytics if you spend a little time in there, to like what people like and what they don't like.
yeah,
And so it's, I don't know, you can have your finger on the heartbeat or the pulse
yeah,
of what your audience is interested in. I do think that is really helpful for sure.
yeah,
um yeah, but with the giving and with the generosity, I'd say even with your campaigns, you know, I get updates from you, and you've got all those stretch goals, and you're just giving more and more comics.
yeah,
And I'm thinking like, man, I'm getting a really good deal on the comic, the whole series. And then there's also just all these great stretch goals. And so, yeah, I really like that. That's something I want to learn from, is just, you know,
yeah,
making sure that you're rewarding people and giving as much as you can. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
really like that.
And with the second Remind campaign, I did a lot of stretch goals that were physical rewards that I had to make, and that campaign really like came back and bit me. I made $107,000 on paper, but at the end of the day, I was in debt at the end of that campaign. So
Ooh,
it was a good thing I was working at DreamWorks because I could pay pay off that debt. But now I'm doing this full time, and so I can't go into debt on these campaigns. In fact,
yeah,
I need to be able to pull money out of it to fund the production of the next book. And um, so so that's why I'm trying to do as many digital stretch goals as I can, and I'm just being really careful with what I promise. I don't want to overpromise, because when I promise something, I have to deliver on it. You
right,
know, I want to over deliver as much as I can, and so anyway, that's part of the reason why the whole set's $99. I want people to get this complete thing and just be thrilled with it, be able to fill up their bookshelf like a foot of books on their bookshelf, these beautiful hardcover books, and then just have 1,000 pages of art, and just really be able to digest the whole story and enjoy it and be very, very content once they're done with it. So that's my main
yeah,
goal. Like bells and whistles don't really do that to me. Like if I get a patch or a sticker, that doesn't give me the warm fuzzy feelings like a really well done comic does that I
right.
can put on my shelf. So I've done a lot of those bells and whistles in the past. I just don't think they're as valuable anymore. So I more or less want to focus on giving people what they really want from me, which is more stories, more comic pages, as much as possible. You know?
Yeah. And I like that for stretch goals, making the book bigger, you know, and
Yeah,
more story content. I like that a lot. The other thing too, though, I'm realizing is, you know, and getting started, it's a little difficult, but having the book done ahead of time is huge,
yeah,
because then your turnaround time. So I'm learning, with this campaign, it wasn't done. I think I'm about 30% complete now. We're
okay,
working through it.
yeah,
Um, but it's also a little bit of a different setup. I've got a full creative team, where for you, it sounds primarily you're doing the whole show, correct? Or do you have other
yeah,
people on board
yeah.
helping out?
Citera 5 and 6, I actually hired an assistant colorist. So that was the first time I really had someone help me with. It was about half of the pages. My assistant helped me. Some of them he did completely, and he matched the style perfectly, which was really surprising, um, because I've tried it in the past and it's never worked. It's always just not looked quite right. So anyway, and my coloring style and my style is so specific and different that it's not something to just be like, oh, let's look up how to color like Jason Brubaker.
Right, right.
So yeah, it's pretty much me, and I do a lot more hiring out for like independent little freelance things now. Like I have an editor for my YouTube videos. My colorist helps me color. I have a flatter that I hire. An editor, Jeremy Barlow. He worked for Dark Horse. He wrote a lot of Star Wars comics. He's my editor, and I hired a proofreader this time just to kind of go through it again. So
Right.
that, but it's all little jobs that I could pay for with couple $100 or maybe $1,000 for some of the bigger ones. I also hired this guy named Nick Welch this time to help me with my lettering, because Citera has very unique, somewhat hand-drawn letters emphasized all throughout it, and it's part of the design of the comic. And so I didn't get to that for books 5 and 6, and I'd already started working on the next project. And so I was just pulling my hair out going, how am I going to put in a month to get this lettering all done? And Nick was like, hey, I can help. And he's a designer, did a beautiful, fantastic job. And it's just like, it's better than I would have done it at this point. So I'm really happy I hired him. And I think I'm going to start using him from now on to help me with lettering and the design of the fonts and all that stuff.
That's great. Yeah. And people know, like, usually I have Eric Weathers on. He's my letterer.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of lettering, and people tell me I should never do any more lettering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd much rather have the product be better, for sure. And there's Eric Weather in the chat right now. He says, just jumping on to say, hey, pay attention to your wife, Eric. Come on, man.
Yeah, we want you to still be married, Eric.
Right. Yeah, no problems. I don't want to be the problem here. Let's see. I'm gonna just check in on the chat here. Albino Thunderbun says, how did Jason meet Doug TenNapel? How did they become friends? Does Jason have any advice for meeting Doug and not contracting germs? I don't know. You heard it. He doesn't wash his hands, or he's pretty proud of that or something. Asking for a friend who appreciates cleanliness.
I didn't know he didn't like washing his hands. I'm pretty sure I've shook his hand a lot. Well, I just emailed him out of the blue when I was doing Remind, because there's just not a lot of independent graphic novel public guys out there that are just, well, at least back in the day, just doing their own thing and successful and being published by different companies. Not really like doing the mainstream thing. And so I just wanted to kind of pick his brain. I felt like, I published Remind. I think it was after I did my first book. So I was like, I have something to show for myself. He might accept me as a peer, maybe. And so I emailed him and I never heard back. And so I was like, forget Doug, no. That's probably how everyone is when they email someone they really they admire and they want to get some reciprocation from. Well, then I launched this podcast called Making Comics, and it was really successful. And I started having different friends on it, and I just emailed him again out of the blue, and I was like, hey, can you be on my podcast, Making Comics? And I believe I'm not, I might be mixing up. There might have been something that happened in between there. There had to be. But anyway, it was like, when you start diving into that world and you've published something, you kind of have friends that are friends of friends. And so I think Ethan Nicole put out Axe Cop, and I emailed him, and he reciprocated, and I sent him a guest comic and he published it. And then I knew that they were friends. So then I emailed them both, and, push comes to shove. Finally, I'm also working at DreamWorks. So I'm like, and Doug wanted to kind of get some meetings set up there. So it's just like we're all kind of just eventually starting to hang out. Like, I had him for lunch at DreamWorks. He was on my podcast with Ethan a couple times. And then suddenly it's just like, okay, now we're buddies, now we're friends. But it was an uphill battle, just like building any other friendship. It wasn't a battle, but it was just like, it took a while to develop that. And now it's just like, I can just call him up and be like, hey, help me figure this out. Or, I'm having some issues, or, cry on the phone to him, So now it's great. We're great friends now. And now that I think back on it, we've been friends a long time. It doesn't even seem like it's been that long, but it has. So, there's no trick other than just, be a nice guy and do something yourself of value. You can't push into a relationship without giving something to that person. And I think that's kind of how I approached when I would ever email somebody was like, what can I give them before I ask them anything, you know? And so I'd suggest approaching any artist you want to rub elbows with in that way. You know,
Right.
maybe start the conversation by, hey, I'm a big fan. Can I send you a copy of my book? You know, that's what I did with a lot of people when I had my first graphic novel done. And that opened a lot of doors up because people got that and they were like, oh, wow, this isn't your average like self-published book. Who are you? You know?
Yeah. This
So,
lettering looks reputable. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is the networking in comics? I can't remember who said this. I read, I don't even remember who it was. It all gets mixed together. But someone said that comics is such a small industry. You'd be surprised at who you can have a conversation with.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's been really true. And I think like your approach is really wise. And it's just being kind. And the other thing is not expecting, like, so on one hand, you could have said, Doug TeNapel needs to get back to me. And if he doesn't, like initially, then you could be really upset about it or whatever.
Yeah.
But it'd be a silly. I mean, he's a busy guy, and I'm sure
Yeah.
people contact him all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been really cool. Again, this is something that's been really great about YouTube is getting to meet people. Like, you know, for me personally, like meeting Ethan Van Sciver, he actually reached out to me first, and then talking to him. Doug TeNapel's another one. He had me on his show once, and that was pretty fun. A lot of other people, you included. I'll brag about this one forever too, but even Kevin Eastman, I had him on the stream, and that was really cool.
Wow,
You know,
that's neat.
and it's like trying not to geek out and stuff. But
Yeah.
but a lot of it is just trying to see like, hey, I just want to meet you, or you know, hey, do you want to be on my show, or like you say, just offer them something.
Yeah.
And if the answer's no because they're busy or whatever, it's cool. Like,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not only going for people, like networking with people that are like already established professionals, but networking with people that are on the same level as you, and they're trying to get in and they're trying to do things. I think that gets overlooked quite often.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big, like, when I started, it was just me and a bunch of people starting out trying to figure it out. And I'm still such good friends with a lot of those people. And, you know, a lot of them haven't done much with their comics, or they've switched and they're doing video games now or something. But I really try to pay attention to the person who's starting out, who is passionate and doing something really neat, but they just maybe don't have any audience, you know? And like, I don't really respond well to people who are all talk and they can't do anything. There's an awful lot of people online, you know, who they want to talk themselves up, but then they have old school assignments. That's all that they have ever done, you know, and it was because they were forced to do it for school. But they have high hopes of doing stuff, but they don't do anything about it, you know? So that's, you know, of course it's hard to like prop those people up because, you know, they need to work for it a little bit. But if someone's really working for it and they have something interesting and unique or just different, you know, I love having kind of showcasing those people as much as I can, because I know, you know, like Doug did the same thing with me, you know, different, you know, there were some really amazing people I had on my Making Comics podcast and my current one right now, that, you know, it's like they're levels above me, but they look down at my little tiny book and we're like, that's cool, you're trying. I'll hang out with you online, you know? So yeah, it's cool. It's a cool world to be in, I think, the comics community. Because you're right, it's so small. I was just thinking about that. Like, how many, like, really, when you look at the grand scheme of it, like, how many successful comic books, Kickstarters, or Indiegogos are there? There's yeah, it looks like there's a lot, but it's really not. I mean, what is there, 100 maybe that are really successful, like that have made over 10,000? Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
It's probably not that big. Like, you could really just fill a room with those people, and that's it.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
and they're all sharing advice. They're all friends in some way, somehow loosely connected.
Yeah. Well, this goes to, I think, part of the strategy. I'm sure you're wise to this, but it seems like there's like a little Venn diagram with each creator, and if you got your little platform, um, we've again, my channel's not huge. I hope to get to 4,000 subscribers eventually, but it works. But part of the strategy is when you're networking with people and you get to jump over into somebody else's Venn diagram of followers, and yet you'll have some that overlap for sure,
Yeah.
but you're reaching more people, and having those healthy relationships with other creators is massively important.
Yeah.
I just want to
Yeah.
emphasize, like, you don't want to be burning bridges.
Yeah.
um
Exactly.
uh,
And
yeah,
I'm so the one thing I don't like about YouTube and is how it's like the controversy sells. It's the same with Twitter,
yeah,
and it just really turns me off. And I don't want to like get rich and famous because I'm tearing people down. I want to be friends with everybody. Even if I disagree with everything you're about, I want to be friends with you because you're a
mm,
person.
yeah,
you know and I may hate your comic character, but I love you as a person. And
right,
vice versa. But so it's like that's one thing that I really want to promote on my channels. It's like I want it to be encouraging. I want it to be like, let's be friends. Like I don't
mm,
want it to be high school where everyone's like cliquey and thinks they're cooler than everybody else.
yeah,
It's just like, ugh, I want to get away from that.
right.
So that's one of the things that kind of drives me nuts a little bit about the whole online self-promotion type stuff. I think it just comes with the
Yeah.
territory, though. It's like it's bound to happen everywhere.
Yeah, and with YouTube, it's not just YouTube. I think it's human nature, but
Yeah,
it incentivizes the
yeah,
drama. And you know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Um, and so I think it's definitely difficult, and that's something I know for my channel. Since we've been trying this new format and everything, we thought, what do people like? They like to be entertained. And
yeah,
so, and it's a constant, you work at it and try to do a show that's just entertaining and light and fun. And again, what I like about comics is escapism,
yeah,
and yeah, that's for
yeah,
Twitter. And I can only speak for me personally, but Twitter is horrible for almost everything, except I really love it for networking.
okay, yeah,
Just to be able to send people direct messages and get in contact with people, it's
yeah.
been an invaluable tool there. But yeah, it
I
can be terrible.
I was ready to just delete it, and I even put a video out saying deleting Twitter. I deleted all my old tweets. But then Doug kept tweeting. He kept like sending me invites to his live stream through Twitter only. I'm like, okay, I'll leave it on because that's the only way Doug sends me these invites. And now it's like that's what I'm doing. I'm inviting people through Twitter. I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is the one reason I can use it, one
Yeah,
way. I'm making new friends now so I could just direct message them. That's the only purpose of it. It's not for me to be on Twitter. So yeah, I think I'll keep it a little longer now.
yeah. It's useful that just for that the direct messages.
Yeah.
I yeah, it's been
Surprisingly, I can't believe I changed my mind on it a little bit, at least to not delete it, but I
yeah.
have. It's really strange.
Facebook, on the other hand, I want to get rid of Facebook, but
Facebook's gone. I've deleted my account like last year, I think. Yeah. I'm
good job.
done. I'm so done with that.
Yeah,
I
good job.
don't miss it either.
Yeah, I keep thinking, why do I have is there really a purpose for this? Well, all my family, like I could just call them,
Yeah.
or vice versa. So I don't know
Yeah.
that we need that.
Well, I did some polls because I have a Patreon account and I was giving away quarterly comics, like printing quarterly issues and sending them to patrons. So I'd have these pledge drives. And after a pledge drive, I would poll my audience, poll my patrons and say, where did you first discover me and what convinced you to become a patron? And, YouTube was huge, mailing list. Well, mailing list doesn't make sense because they're already on it. So they would have found me somehow else. But regardless, I had Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Twitter brought in like 1% Facebook on some of them brought in like 0.5%, and it was the lowest one. So I was, after like 2 or 3 polls, realizing that Facebook just did nothing for me, even though I could promote every day the same amount as on Twitter. It's like, finally I just was like, okay, if it does it again, I'm pulling the plug. You know, you're walking on eggshells right now for Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, Facebook. And sure enough, didn't do anything for me again. So I finally cut it off after that.
Yeah.
So,
and you can spend money. Like I've spent, this is my first crowdfunding campaign. I spent money on Facebook ads because people kept saying, "Oh yeah, you do it Facebook ad." No, I would never suggest anybody to, unless you already know for some reason something I don't know. But I think your time and money is better spent just creating content for people elsewhere.
I've had multiple people approach me saying, "I want to do Facebook ads for you. All you got to do is pay for the advertising, you know, the money that goes into it. But I want to manage it, and I know how to do it." And, you know, one guy was in-house at one point, and it's like, it just didn't do anything. And it was money going out of the account every month. And then there was another guy that approached me and like, "This is what I do." And I'm like, I was about ready to say, okay, fine, I'll make a new Facebook page just for you to experiment with. But I just couldn't get myself to do it because it just doesn't, I just don't think it's going to be worth it for me. Now, someone like Doug Tenaple, it seems like, I know he's paying for some marketing with his Earthworm Jim campaign. It's going really well for him because Earthworm Jim is a very established name, and there's a lot of nostalgia with it. And so it pulls in people that are outside of comics like all the time. And so it's really successful for that. I'm just waiting for him to do a new campaign that's not an established character and do that same kind of advertising. And if it works for him, then I might start like trying to follow some in his footsteps on it. But I don't have an Earthworm Jim type property. So, you know,
right.
I don't know if it would work for the rest of us.
There's that detail. Yeah,
that's a big detail.
it is. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Let's see. Amand Rose says, "Ask Jason if he still plans on deleting his Twitter after 10,000 followers." LOL. Maybe just for DMs. I don't know. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to at this point because it really is working for connecting, especially now that I'm trying to get on people's live streams and invite people onto my live streams. It's like, for some reason, that's where everyone's making their communications at. So it's not necessarily through the Twitter, but through the direct messaging. So I'm stuck in this hard place where I want to get rid of it, but I can't, like everything else in life.
It's tough. It lives another day. That in fact, Twitter DMs is how Jason and I got connected for this stream. So it seems to be working.
I've just accepted it now. Now it's back in my life.
Albino Thunderbun says, "I agree," or Sweetcast, "I agree with you about Twitter. I got it for networking and to promote indie comics. I try to avoid everything else." Yep. It is I don't know, sometimes it's just a trap. You see things and I don't know, you just have to move on for sure. But it can be useful. I'm going to be keeping it. It's valuable. So we've talked a little bit. Let's check in on the campaign and see how it's doing. I'm going to share the screen here. And everybody, I'm going to refresh the screen. This always makes me nervous, but Citera and, if you've got a wrench, don't hesitate to post a link. Citera books 5 and 6, and you can get the complete box set. You can get everything. This is over 1,000 pages of story, great comics, really cool art. I'm going to refresh this and we'll see what happens. Drum roll. 610 backers. All right. That's just to let everybody know we're going to do that again. So if you have not backed Citera yet, I strongly suggest doing so. I did. I'm really, really looking forward to getting it. Let's see. We talked about a few things, and I want to hit on Patreon because that's sort of the future. It's something that I have not really got into. I technically have a Subscribestar account, and I think I have 2 subscribers there is all. But what can, I don't know, how has Patreon been as a tool for comic creators? What kind of advice do you have?
I have real mixed feelings with it, and I'll start it by saying I don't want to build a business and a product that is based on patrons and donations and support like that. I think it's great that people want to do that, but when I think about other companies that are successful, like let's pretend Apple was on Patreon and they needed Patreon support to keep producing their Mac products, right? It's like then that would mean they have a failed business model. They're not making the product that is actually able to sell itself and that people would pay for to grow the business. And I feel like as a comic artist and a publisher, I need to look at my business in that same way. Like if it's not able to sell to the real world and support me, then there's something broken about my business. And I shouldn't have to rely on donation type support. Now, if it's a nonprofit and if it's more of a donation type, business, whatever that would be, like say I'm giving away my comics, there's some part of me that wants to like make certain kind of books and just be like, here, take them, like it would work good for that because it's kind of in that system. But for the comics I publish, like that are stories, I want them to sell in bookstores. I want them to just really work on their own. And so I'm hesitant to dive into Patreon as my, and trying to make it my primary source of income, because then it's just growing the amount of crutches I'm using. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
And now Patreon is great though, because it's really given me, it hasn't solved my problems as far as financially, but when I first started working on Citera, I launched the Patreon. It was right when Patreon started. And I, got immediately, I don't know, it was a couple $100 right away, and it started growing, and I would post an update once a month when I would post my comic update for Citera, because I would post like once a month only. It was big long scrolling pages originally. You can't find them online anymore because I started publishing on Webtoons, and that changed everything. I'm going all over the place, sorry. But it was really exciting because I was at DreamWorks. The Kickstarter was great for Remind, but all the money went into the product and not paying my bills for the next year. And so Patreon became this like kind of middle ground where I was like, well, maybe this can actually pay my bills, and I just need to kind of give people something else, maybe it's one-on-one video calls or, what, I don't know what it is, or just access to the sketches. And so it started growing as I was working on Citera, and it got up to about $800, I think, at the peak of when I was working on Citera at DreamWorks. And I was announcing that I was leaving DreamWorks and going full time. And I think that's when it kind of spiked because people were excited. They're like, I want to help you, And then I moved to Idaho, and it was like around $800. And I was like, okay, this might keep growing. But then Webtoons approached me a little bit before that, but they offered me to be a featured artist on Webtoons. This was when they were the first year that they were around in the English portal of their site. And so, that was a stable amount of income every month. It barely covered my bills in Idaho. So I took it, started publishing Citera on Webtoons. And suddenly I pulled back a little bit from Patreon because it wasn't about growing it on my own and showing it to patrons anymore and showing it on my own website and hoping that the support would grow. And so it just kind of dropped back down, stayed about $400 the whole time I was on Webtoons for about 2.5 years. And it never really grew. It was really hard to get it to grow because everyone saw me as kind of an established guy. I was featured on Webtoons, so there's no point in supporting him, right? And I'm not really giving a whole lot of extra stuff to patrons because I have this contract with Webtoons. It's like digitally tied up with them. So after Webtoons finished, I did a big push on Patreon again, and it started growing again. But I'm finding it's very challenging to make it grow. unless you give like secondary type things, like one-on-one time, or like what really works for me is I'll print up like an issue of my new comic that I'm working on, and only send it to patrons. And so like once a month, once every quarter, well, when I was doing this model, I would print these books and send it to my patrons, and then all the money from that Patreon month would go to printing it and shipping it out. And I could have pledge drives for that to grow the audience, but then it kind of stays a little bit and fades slowly, but it still grows, but it's just a lot of work, and it's a lot of secondary stuff that's not really my primary business model. So with all that said, it's like, and also, patrons, gotten a lot of flack for some of the decisions they've made and who they kick off. And, if what you're doing is considered weird to them, they've just been known to unplug you, kind of like every other major site. And so it makes a lot of people nervous, that, well, I'm going to say a swear word on somebody's podcast, and then patrons just going to can me, even though that has nothing to do with them. So and that's where Subscribestar started getting popular because of that, And so there's a lot of like mixed feelings I have with it. I've gone to a lot of the Patreon conventions as well. So I've met with them all, and I really love them as people. But the site itself seems to be really glitchy all the time, and new features are always broken and taking forever to actually work correctly. And features on the site have like the search feature has just been terrible ever since it started. And I had one-on-one calls with them to say, this is the thing you got to fix. Okay, yeah, we're going to do it. And then 6 months later, this is the thing you got to fix. Okay, we're going to do it. And then 6 months later, well, we changed our business plan. We're not focusing on search anymore. I'm like, well, you said this was at the top of the list like a year ago. Yeah. So just stuff like that. It's like, maybe Patreon is not the thing I want to invest all my time and effort into it after all. Yeah. And with things like Indiegogo and and Kickstarter, like I feel like the real strategy for me is making putting the work into something up front, getting it done, doing a Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever, and then pulling a little extra money out of it to put towards your next project. It would be the production budget of your next project, which is what I'm doing right now. Like with my current campaign, anything over about $50,000 goes directly into the production of the next project. So with the Indiegogo and Kickstarter, I'm about 72,000. Like that's almost covering the whole next year's worth of production on my next book. And if I could just keep things going in that pattern, then it doesn't matter if I'm making any money on Patreon. I don't have to like play that game and jump through those hoops, even though I love my patrons, and there's a lot of them that will stay on, and I'll still probably give them quarterly comics and stuff like that. But it's definitely not my focus. I don't want that Patreon to be my focus. I don't want them to dangle the carrot and control what I do. I don't want to have to be walking on eggshells worrying that, that someone's going to get mad at me and email them and say, you need to pull this guy off because his views are incorrect, Right. And so anyway, I just like the idea of building that loyal customer base that really loves what I do. They love the message I have. They trust me, I trust them, and just slowly, one by one, grow that base that I can email and say, hey, I have a new product, and hopefully that can just keep going. I mean, so far it's been working so far, and I think especially with this current campaign, I think this is finally the shift for me to where I can now kind of, next year is going to be less about trying to scrounge for money every month, and instead just focus on the thing and launch the next campaign. And because that's, at the end of the day, that's what people want. They want the book, you know. They want a new book. They don't want a t-shirt. I mean, they might. You can give them that option.
Right.
You know, Teespring, then you don't have to worry about, you know, fulfilling it. But yeah, it's so Patreon, it's good. I love Jack, but I don't want it to be my focus.
Yeah.
You know, Patreon wants you to focus on building Patreon. I don't want that to be my business model, though.
Right. Yeah, and that's it's been a tough thing for me because there are definitely different incentives depending on what platform you're on. And like YouTube, for example, I don't know, their algorithm has been all over the place. That I've really tried to hone in and figure it out, and then it changes, and then it kind of gets frustrating. And now it's just every single video I do gets demonetized. Even like this live stream, you know, not a swear word to be heard, nothing. It'll be demonetized. So I don't know. That's how it goes. But yeah, that's why I like I mean, it's a good platform. Things could change again, just like blogs have changed. And you know, all sorts of things have changed. But I really like, for independent comics truly being independent, having that mailing list and being able to communicate with people when the next book arrives, obviously not abuse that.
See, and what's neat about the mailing list is it transcends the shift in sites that are out there. Like, you know, MySpace was around when I started building my mailing list. If I built everything on MySpace, it would be a joke, you know, to try to keep that going. You know, so I was on Tumblr for a little bit and DeviantArt, you know, trying to, and I've abandoned all those, you know, obviously. And but the mailing list are people I've collected from all those places. Well, not MySpace. I didn't really participate in MySpace. So I was a little bit too old for it when it launched. But the thing is, Twitter is eventually going to die, you know. Something's new is going to replace everything. But the thing is, if you're connected with people through the emails, that's going to last a lot longer, you know, than, you know, eventually maybe something will replace email, but it's an awful lot of my life, you know. Every day I do emails and businesses through emails and communication with family and fans, and, you know, like it's really you're connecting at a deeper level because you're sharing a personal, it's like your phone number, you're sharing it with somebody. So that's going to transcend whatever happens with Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, you know,
right.
Is that mailing list. So that's why I've put an emphasis on it. And Patreon, you know, Patreon will one day disappear or something else will replace it, you know, and that's fine, you know, as long as I've built the trust with those people and collected them, and so I can just easily blast out to all of them and say, hey guys, you know.
Yeah, so it's a very basic level of communication, and that's really what it comes down to. And so and you've been really agile with, you know, 10 years you've been doing crowdfunding comics. Who knows what'll come down. Right now it feels like crowdfunded comics are on the upswing, and I'm curious to see how much they grow. But yeah, it's something else that you're one of the really few people that are doing it full time. I'm not there yet. I'd love to someday. I'm trying to apply some things. But one more question for you. I'm curious, when you pulled the plug, you know, and you decided you were going to take that leap of faith and be doing comics full time, how did you know it was the right time, or what was kind of the decision point for you?
Yeah, there was a lot of things that built up to that. And I'd been working in Hollywood for almost 20 years at that point. And, you know, I was making over $100,000 a year living in LA, and had a wife and 2 kids, you know, pretty young kids at the time. And there was just a lot of things that were really pushing and pulling at me, and it got to a point to where I just felt like I need to get out of Hollywood. It was, I feel like it's good that I went there, and it was right timing to go. It was a learning experience. It was a great career, but at that time in my life, it felt like I need to leave. Like, this is the end of Hollywood, the Hollywood road for me. And so I didn't really, I knew I could have stayed easily. And I mean, DreamWorks wanted me to renew my contract. They wanted me to keep working on Kung Fu Panda 3. And it was just like, there was no questions asked. But I was just like, no, I got to end it. You know, my second 3-year contract's up. I have to stop. And I'm going to move out of state. So sorry.
We're done.
Yeah, I just have to end it, you know. And like, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I would have stayed in LA, because the cost of living there is so expensive. And there would have been all my connections, and you know, everybody keeps throwing jobs at you when you're in those circles, you know. And if you deliver on time and you do a good job, then your name's passed around forever. So so that was the situation I was in. But I was like, you know what? I just need to get away from Hollywood stuff. I need to move to a small town somewhere where it's like, maybe I'll just find some like freelance work online, or I'll go work at some like cheesy like graphics sign printing company on the side, and I'll just work on my comic. But I don't have to really make that much money with the comic to help pay the bills if I'm in a small town, you know. But I also know that I have this amazing portfolio, this amazing career, so I should be able to get away with kind of going anywhere and finding work. So, so with that kind of an attitude is when I started telling my wife, like, I think I need to leave Hollywood. You know, I just feel like I shouldn't be here anymore. And I don't know if the comic thing is going to work necessarily, because I wasn't making a living at it at the time at all. But I think I need to, you know, I need to start looking into like trying to find some other kind of freelance work, trying to figure out how to leave DreamWorks, trying to figure out how to sell our house. So a lot of turmoil at the time, you know, because it's like, it doesn't make sense, but it just felt like it was the right thing to do. Like in my mind, it was like God telling me, like, do this. Like, I will plan the steps type thing, you know, like real leap of faith type thing. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work, but okay, I think this is the right thing. And so my wife kind of got on board. Like, if we moved to Idaho, my parents are retired. They're there so they can help with babysitting, and we can, you know, sell our house and like probably buy something outright if we move there. So that will relieve the mortgage bills. We already paid off our cars, so that's good. So maybe we could just really eliminate a lot of the bills, and then I won't have to do too much freelance work, you know. So that was kind of the approach going into it. And then as soon as I made those decisions, things started changing quickly. Like, suddenly Webtoons approached me and said, hey, we want you to be a featured comic artist on our platform. I'm like, really? You know, I was super skeptical, because like no one paid you money to put your comic on their platform at that time. And so, but a couple of friends of mine did it, or had theirs on there a couple months before mine. So I called them all up, and they're like, yeah, it's legit. They actually paid. Okay. So I signed a contract with them, but at the same time, there was some freelance projects that I stumbled into that were just like YouTube videos, like doing animation. And I was like, hey guys, I could totally do this. And I like what you guys are doing. They're like, great. Can we get you to quit DreamWorks and come work for us? And I was like, not yet, you know, like, but I'll work for you when I'm in this transitional state. And so sure enough, you know, like everything just kind of started falling into place. We sold our house way more than what we expected. We were able to buy a house here with that money. I was started immediately working for Webtoons and getting paychecks from them, from South Korea, money from South Korea. While I'm living in Idaho, I never had to like look for freelance work. In fact, I had to like wean off the freelance work that I had with this YouTube company. And it's just like, it's miraculously just continued to go. Like, it's been 4 years now, and all the bills keep getting paid every month. Sometimes it's a little stressful. I mean, there's a lot of times it's been stressful, especially once you make that transition and it's all the weight is on your creative output to that's not something that anyone's telling you to do. It's all based on, I think this will sell, and hopefully if I finish this, people will buy it. You know?
Right.
And so but it just keeps going, it keeps growing, and I keep getting more confirmations that, yeah, I just need to keep going, you know, like, there's no reason to stop yet, you know, but maybe there'll come a day when I get that signal again, maybe in 10 years, 20 years, suddenly I'll be like, I need to quit comics. You know, or, well, I don't know what I'll do then, but, you know, I know I'll be taken care of is kind of where I'm at this point in my life. I really have, you know, I just really believe that I'm being taken care of in a kind of a miraculous way. Otherwise, there's no way I could do it, because it's just too much pressure. You know, it sounds weird to say that, but it's just too much pressure to just journey out by faith and just do something and hope that it works out. And like I said, though, I had a big career, so I knew I had the ability. You know, companies were paying me a lot of money to beautify their message and their product. So I knew there was something special I had for people to want to pay me that kind of money to do it. So I figured if I can just reinvest that into my own stuff now instead of their stuff, then why wouldn't this work? You know?
Right.
And but there's so many days where you wake up and you go, I don't think this is going to work, but I don't know what else to do, so I'll go in and keep working on it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, maybe there'll be a month of that, and then suddenly you'll get a couple cool things that happen, and you're like, yeah, this is why I'm here. This is I should be here. I'm glad I'm doing this. It's making sense now. And, you know, very much so a big roller coaster the whole time. So it's interesting, and you know, even a massive success doesn't eliminate that fear, because it's like, if you have success once with one thing, I'm worried about, well, what's going to happen once this money dries up in a year? You know what I'm saying? I'm sure I'm with Webtoons right now, but Webtoons is going to stop as soon as I'm done with Citera, and that was a huge stress. Like I was stressing out for the last year of working on Citera, because I was like, what am I going to do next? Patron's not there. Like, Webtoons doesn't guarantee me a new comic, you know, job. Once I finish one book, they're not going to guarantee me another one, you know?
Right.
And I don't have any agents. I don't have publishers lined up. I'm so focused on finishing Citera that I don't have any time to develop anything else. What am I going to do? And I'm living, you know, paycheck to paycheck with this Webtoons money, because it's not paying me a whole lot. And so, like, I don't know the answer to that question other than live by faith and, you know, cross that bridge when it comes. And so that's how I've been living. And it's been really challenging, but it's been really rewarding at the same time, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting how things work out, you know, like when, I don't know, it's not always, but I guess when it works out, I don't believe in coincidences most of the time, but it's one of those things. It works out, and I think there's still you know, bright future, because I don't know, indie comics are really an exciting place right now, and it just feels like they're continuing to be more so. So it sounds like, I don't know, do you know then what the next project is, or you have a few ideas?
Yeah, I've stressed out about it enough that I've started and stopped multiple things. And one of the things I started last year was I started developing this old comic I made called Phobos, and I started experimenting with it for my patrons. And so I've done about 200 pages of this Phobos book, and what the plan is, and people on Patreon really, really like it. and I really have fun with it. It's really just a natural thing for me to draw because I developed these characters when I was a teenager. So I've been drawing them all my life. And subject matter is really fun. It's like a spoof on classic horror characters. So it's kind of like Monsters or Addams Family, you know, type stuff. Really fun monster type stuff to draw. And so I'm planning early next year, probably February or probably March, to launch a Kickstarter for Indiegogo for a 500-page first volume of Phobos, because I can really knock out the pages because they're all black and white, and I can knock them out pretty quick. And I think I'll just keep feeding chapters to my patrons every quarter, because it's just a fun reward for them. Like, they're the only ones that are getting the floppy, but they're like 100-page floppies, you know. They're manga sized and just like these really cool little books. And so they're the only ones that are getting these. I don't print them and sell them anywhere else. And if you're not a patron that quarter, you don't get it, you know, type thing. Maybe if you're a higher patron, you might have access to it. But I mean, access to older volumes, editions. So anyway, that's really going to be the next thing I focus on next year. And a lot of it's already done. So it's already on the tracks. It's already moving. It's kind of proven itself within this little group of patrons. And so I'm going to really test it with the public exposure to it next year, and just see if people care, if people, you know, come out of the woodwork and pledge on it, and it goes over again, then I'll keep working on that, because I have about 4 volumes that I could do in a row, which would be 2,000 pages.
Wow.
Which is ridiculous.
Wow.
But so that's kind of on the tracks and already moving. There's also another thing I've been working on this year. It's this book called Shapes. It's about a 130-page graphic novel. I was commissioned to do it by this company called Cave Pictures Publishing, and it kind of came at the right time. It kind of eased my stress over finances, and they let me write it and draw it and color it. So it's kind of like I'm doing my own comic, but I'm getting paid for it. And so that's been a kind of a neat experience to just work with a real publisher. And it's a halfway done right now. So I have 3 more issues to do. So once this Kickstarter wraps up, I'll finish those 3 issues. It'll start coming out later this year. Early next year, I'm going to launch Phobos. Hopefully that works well. If it doesn't work really well with Phobos, then there's another project that I've already started writing that's kind of ready to start working on. So there's a lot of things in the fire. There's also I've been developing this thing called cognitive drawing, which is getting really close to being ready to release as a physical book. It's a drawing type workbook that it's really cool. You can actually find it on Gumroad if you search for me on Gumroad. I have a children's book I wrote and drew. It's just I need to color it, but it's gotten some pretty good attention from certain people. But I don't know the children's book world, so I kind of don't really know how to move forward with that. So I'm like, I might as well just keep working on graphic novels, you know, as long as I keep having the ideas.
Right.
So
cool.
yeah. And I'm writing a horror book. It's like a really dark horror, and it's so dark that I don't want to draw it. And so so I started writing as a novel, and it's getting really close to being done, and I don't know what I'll do with it because it's so not my genre, but we'll see. So there's all these things. I don't know what's going to really come out or not. I'm just kind of waiting to see what gets done and see how things work with different pieces. And it's like a big puzzle piece, and you're piecing it together as you go.
It's like you gotta, it's a long pipeline.
Yeah.
So you gotta keep stocking it. So that
Exactly.
that's good.
But the ideas don't run out. I get new ideas all the time, and there's definitely a lot of graphic novels that I have in my brain that not a lot, but let's say I think there's 4 entire Citera length type graphic novel stories that I really want to tell. And I just hope and pray that I can have keep going long enough so I can tell them all, you know?
Yeah.
And I would really love to be able to just finish one every at least 2 years. I don't want to spend more than 2 years on a project, because then I start getting tired of it, you know? So I want to knock it out and have something amazing and then move on to the next one. So that's kind of been, that's my goal. That's my business model now. And hopefully have the Kickstarter so they pay for the next project every time, you know, pay for the production of the next year.
Perpetuates. Yeah.
And if that's the case, if it keeps going like that, then it will relieve a lot of stress, basically, because the last 4 years have been high stress years, because it's always like, how am I going to keep making this work?
Yeah.
So
such good, nice transition time then. And it's cool because it's the culmination then of a lot of time, a lot of effort in Citera. I'm just going to show that one more time here. Citera, you can pick up books 5 and 6 if you have not picked up any of it yet, or you can do like I did and get the entire set, the entire series for $99. That's over 1,000 pages of story and art. And yeah, really, really cool. Jason, I'm really, really glad to be able to talk to you. It's been really cool, especially because I've been following you for so long. So yeah, it's cool to finally talk to you. So that's great.
Well, I appreciate you having me on your show, man.
No problem. Anytime. And I mean that. So
sounds
great.
Good.
I think then, let's see, I'm just going to check in on the chat one time. I don't want anyone to be ignored. Battle Dime says, finally, what? Brubaker on Sweetcast. Yep, that's right. All the time people are like, cognitive drawing. I've been saying, like, I want to get better at drawing. So everybody's been referring me to cognitive drawing, and I've watched some videos on it and stuff, but good stuff.
It's a good system. I'm really proud of the results of it, because it's actually, I've been using it. My son's school started using it as a curriculum, and the teacher, after the semester, she came to me and she's like, I've never had a drawing program that's worked like this. Like, these kids will do these exercises, and the next week they'll be able to draw it like exactly like they practiced the week before, because of the process. And so, and it's, you know, it's the way I learned how to draw things, learned how to imitate from other people and put stuff into my memory. So I'm really pleased with it. I don't feel like I'm a teacher. So I don't wake up and go, I'm going to work on cognitive drawing again. Instead, I go, I want to work on my story. And so I keep putting it to the side, but I really want it to get done so I can have a book and be like, here's the thing. Like, if you want to learn to draw, learn this technique, at least try it. You know, it might not work for you, but most of the people who use it really, really absorb something from it. And then you can just use it for any style you want to imitate. So, yeah, sorry, it's a pitch for cognitive drawing now, but I really think it's something special. I don't know of anything out there like it, really.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's hard to come by. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of like how to draw stuff out there.
There is, yeah.
But finding simple, like, I don't know. This is what I want to learn how to draw. That's been always for me. I don't know. I've played around with drawing my own stuff. I just love writing. But yeah, I'd like to draw my own someday, and I want it to look good so people don't laugh at me. So yeah, I'm gonna check that out for sure, and get a little bit more into it. Let's see. I think that's it. Any last questions, guys? Post them in. And I will say for sure, check out Jason Brubaker also on his YouTube channel, which is just Jason Brubaker. And if you don't do anything else tonight, check out Citera, the Indiegogo campaign. The link is in the description below, and you might as well back Downcast. I have a feeling that everybody on here has already backed it or decided they're not going to back it, but we'll put it there anyway. So thanks everybody. And thank you, Jason. And we will see you next time.
All right. See ya.